All right. So today I'm really delighted to have a conversation with Zeke Warren, who won an American Wine Society Educational Foundation scholarship in 2024 for his PhD research related to winemaking strategies affecting wine consumption. Not consumption, wine composition. Sorry about that. Hi, Zeke. Welcome and thank you for being here with me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, why don't we start by, introduce yourself and tell us about really what prompted you to start some research or some studies in wine and winemaking.
Okay, great. So in undergrad, I was doing food science,
Hmm.
and during that time, I also worked at a cidery and at a bar. I was a bartender, and that made me like really interested in the complexity of different beverages, and
Hmm.
that pushed me more towards chemistry of beverages as well, since the food science background. And while cocktails are interesting, there's not much, there's not many things you can study with them. But where wine is such a complex matrix and there's so many different things you can look at inside of it. So that led me to apply to grad school to be able to study more. And I ended up at Penn State and being able to study wine chemistry with a great food science department and great advisor, Dr. Misha Kwasniewski.
Wow. From cocktail to wine chemistry. That's a nice title.
Yeah.
Excellent. So you were awarded an AWSEF scholarship in support of your research, and this scholarship was sponsored by one of our local chapter, the Lehigh Valley from Pennsylvania. So can you tell us more about this research that you shared with us and how it intends to support the grape and wine industry?
So my research is started off very broad.
Hmm.
It's looking at basically the tannin chemistry in wine. So I'm trying to modify it. My original project was helping especially hybrid cultivars on the East Coast, like
Hmm.
that have low tannins and very low of that bold like mouthfeel that we expect in reds, like Cabernet Sauvignon.
Hmm.
Um, so I was tasked to try to increase the extraction of these tannins in cultivars like Chambourcin and Noiret. So that led me to this method called accentuated cut edges, or ACE, where I fragment the skins, hopefully increase the surface area of them. So basically using an immersion blender to cut them up more,
Hmm.
and then to allow a more extraction of these tannins. It
Okay.
worked really well with Noiret, not so much with Chambourcin. I think there's
Hmm.
other interactions going on with that, but more needs to be done, I think, with this type of work to see if we can actually extract more
Hmm.
from Chambourcin.
And why tannins are so important in red wines? For those people who may watch the video and may not have a wine chemistry background.
Sure, sure. Tannins are very important for the wine because they give this mouth feel, this texture, this drying sensation in
Hmm.
your mouth when you're drinking it. That's akin to these bold reds like Cab
Hmm.
Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, things like that. Um, Consumers are a lot of times expecting to have these characteristics when they drink wine.
Hmm.
That's why we're trying to make these other cultivars that are non-traditional in the normal sense
Hmm.
to have more characteristics similar to that. Um,
Okay.
this will allow like other winemakers in the East Coast and especially PA or Pennsylvania to
Hmm.
have a broader range of wines that they can make, and they can support a different audience.
Hmm. So, at what stage are you with your research? Have you conducted several trials? You said that it works with one of the cultivars, but not the other one. Where are you in terms of your research results?
So with this project particularly, I think this one is I'm done with doing data collection. It still
Hmm.
needs to be written up, but we've done three different vintages, so three different years of
Yeah.
two cultivars, and we've seen the same results basically throughout. We've done these at a couple different scales also, so like um, a few gallon scale down to like milliliters scale.
Wow. Okay.
It's quite hard to do a big scale for winemaking to replicate. So
yeah. So were you looking at maybe the way to scale up your methodology from the bench to maybe a pilot plant and maybe to a more commercial setting? Was it part of your research?
So it wasn't quite. We were at least comparing this micro scale to the pilot scale. However, we didn't test the ACE on any commercial scale, but there is equipment available to purchase that can do this process for you at large scale. So you wouldn't have to stick an immersion blender in a vat of grapes.
So now you're into data analysis. Did I understand correctly?
Well, one more time.
So now in terms of your research, you are looking at your data analysis. Did I understand correctly?
Mostly just writing this up. The
Okay.
data analysis is all done. I did
Okay.
most of the statistics. We conducted sensory analysis on these as well. But it's just
And what's the scoop? You don't want to share? It's not published?
No, I can definitely. I presented this at places before. So
Okay.
it was significantly increasing the tannins in both cultivars. However, with the Chambourcin, it was not sensorially different. But the Noiret, they were able to tell a difference in mouthfeel. So they could taste. They had higher drying sensation on their tongue and mouth with the Noiret.
Okay. So what was your hypothesis of why Chambourcin is different?
So I think in Chambourcin, this hybrid is very different than the other normal cultivars, vinifera. And one of the things that people have hypothesized about differently with this one is that there's other proteins in it, in this hybrid wine, that will bind with these tannins and then they will fall out of solution. So a lot of times you get tannins at the beginning of extraction and then you lose them by the end. So in the end wine, there's almost zero.
Yeah, it makes sense because that's one of the hypotheses how we perceive astringency in the mouth. You know, the dryness caused by tannins that the proteins precipitate the tannins. Interesting. So, anything surprising that happened during your research? You know, we usually have a good design, we have great hypotheses, and then often unexpected results happen. Anything as such happened to your research?
That was one of the unexpected things. I wasn't fully aware of that when I started using Chambourcin. But mostly I expected it to happen with increasing the tannins. Another thing I looked at with this was actually volatiles. So the aroma compounds. We would expect to maybe have differences in these as well. We did see some differences, but it was not vast differences in aroma compounds. This one compound, linalool, it has kind of a florally character. It did increase a little bit, like significantly, but not like enough to probably cause a difference in aroma. But depending on the amount of this treatment, maybe we could get more.
Excellent, thank you. And did you have a chance to present your results to your industry partners, to your local industry? Any feedback from them?
I went to a extension talk last year, 2 years ago, and I did explain this technique to them as well. And it was a small group of them, but I think it went well, and they were interested in seeing if this research goes any further.
So how do you see your work, influencing the local grape and wine industry in the future, or even, beyond Pennsylvania, any other impact that you could anticipate? Since you start writing, I suppose you have that in mind.
The main thing I hope with this is that it can give winemakers, especially smaller winemakers that don't have a lot of ability to experiment with things, give them another option to diversify their products. So this allows them to have a Chambourcin that was low body, and then potentially, or not a Chambourcin, a hybrid wine like a Noiret that is lower body, and then something that had increased tannin as well, just to give get to different consumer segments in their area.
Yeah. And I realized that a PhD study, are conducted on 3-4 years, depending. But do you have any hypothesis on how this technique would affect the maturation of the wine? In terms of, if there are higher tannins, would they be stable? Would they, decompose quickly? Do you have any ideas?
I haven't looked into this exactly. I usually just measure the wines that year or a year later. However, it would be interesting to check them after another year or so, just to see how they progress in this. I think they probably would change. At least the Noiret might change more. With more tannins, you have protection against oxidation, not protection, but they can be oxidized in different ways. So potentially there would be different effects long term. I wouldn't be able to extrapolate what it could be, though.
Okay.
Exactly.
Sorry, just curious as a researcher. So let's go back to the scholarship, and again we were very happy to support you in that regard. So how did receiving the AWSEF scholarship really impacted your studies or your career trajectory? Can you share?
It did. It really helped with taking off the stress, a lot of the stress of grad school with not much funding, not much stipend to live in the area. So it helps take away that stress. There's obviously still the stress of grad school, but this is a huge help. Additionally, I think this was also really good for me to help me myself understand what industry people are interested as well. I was able to go to the Lehigh chapter and give a quick talk, and then talk to the people in the group as well to see what they were interested in and how my project could potentially help with what they were doing.
Fantastic! I didn't know that. That's great that you had this opportunity to meet them. And
yes.
So, what did they say?
They were impressed
okay.
with what I was doing. They were interested in hearing where it progressed and things like that as well.
Fantastic. So I guess what my next question was about how the scholarship opened networking opportunities or career opportunities. You just gave me one example. Any other examples on how receiving a scholarship doesn't have to be the AWSEF, but had how those scholarships could help you be known and open up some opportunities for you?
Right. It definitely helps with networking as well, like you mentioned. Just being a part of this group that has been awarded to, I can potentially reach out to them if their research might overlap with what I'm doing. It's like going to conferences, just being able to talk to new people, more experiences, potentially different ideas on how you can edit your research or future connections for jobs later in life.
So you were telling me you are writing your dissertation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I know it's a stressful moment, but do you have any idea of what's next? Where do you project yourself after your PhD defense?
So I'm not entirely sure yet. I was awarded a USC NIFA fellowship, so I have funding for the next couple years. So if in the worst case, I can stay here for a bit longer than I would want to, but it is secure. So my plan is to potentially defend in the fall and then graduate in the spring. So then after that, I'm interested in potentially doing a postdoc somewhere to push more of this research forward and do more chemical analysis. But industry is never not an option for me as of right now.
Okay.
I didn't originally plan to do a PhD either. My original plan was a master's, but then a project opened up and I transitioned into a PhD position. So,
well, it gives you, good foundation for whatever, is next for you. So
definitely
that's good. So what really excites you about wine chemistry? I studied as a wine flavor chemist, and, just doing GCO and GC was a bit of a burden for me. It looks like plumbing sometimes, and that's why I moved on to sensory, which was more about dealing with people. But just curious about what you find, what is your passion, with wine chemistry?
Right. I really like learning more about this complex matrix. Like we, as a wine researching community, sometimes we act like we know more than we actually do. There's so many questions that we don't know and we want to answer. And there's always this question of, or you answer a question and then it opens up 3 more questions. And I always want to get the next answer as well. So my current work is trying to piece together a puzzle of oxidation, and it's very confusing but very exciting at every moment, because when I can find a new answer, it's awesome. Like, it's very exciting.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic, and I wish you all the best, for writing your dissertation. If you could give maybe, one piece of advice to someone considering entering a career in viticulture or enology, what would that be?
Are you speaking about with school, or in what way?
Well, school, or that's your experience, I assume. So I would say, yeah. If people were wondering, is it a good field for me to go into study? What would you say to them?
Sure. I would suggest trying to talk with different people. So I would suggest not taking the first opportunity you get and trying to find out which project or which faculty member is the best fit for you. There's a huge range of people out there that could work well or not with you. And I think that's one of the most important things to help make your foundation in research much better. And additionally, also, your project is, if you enjoy what you do for your project, it'll make the school much easier to do.
Yeah. Thanks for that. So as you may know, we are in the period of application for the 2025 scholarship. And I was just wondering if, having been through that process, if you had any suggestions for people considering applying, what it takes to write a good application, whatever the scholarship.
I have a couple things, actually. So one of the big things is, it's getting a little late now in the application time, but I would suggest applying early and making sure that you have the correct materials ready for it. When I applied, I did not understand the rubric correctly, and I remember you reached out to me again to let me know that I should change it, and then giving me that opportunity, it really helped. That I very appreciate that I was able to change it and fit the rubric better for this. Additionally, I think what people in school are focusing on a lot is being able to write scientifically. And for a lot of scholarships and grants, the people who are reading them are not, or giving them to you, are not in that same space as you are. So they're interested in how your research can affect them or the wine industry in general without using all these jargon terms. So that's something I suggest, trying to make it so a winemaker could understand, or a viticulturist, a grape grower could understand.
And the American Wine Society is really a wine consumer organization. We are not part of the industry per se. We consume and we support and we advocate for the grape and wine industry, for sure. So even not dumbing down your research. No. That's not what I mean. But at least showing the value, the potential applications, and why it's so important to conduct that research. That's we can understand that. Definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it will be my last question. The grape and wine industry in this country and globally is at crossroads. A lot of negative news about consumption and production declines. But for someone, studying this complex matrix as you describe it, why wine is important to support and advocate for?
I have a couple ideas for that.
Okay.
One, it is a lot of people have built their lives on making wine or growing grapes. I think it's important to keep having them be part of the economy, the world economy, and the different national and nation economies. Following that, I think wine is a big cultural part of a lot of people's life. It's becoming less so in the new generations, as you mentioned, but in other countries other than U.S., I think it is more of a thing, more of a cultural thing, and I think we should keep it as a part of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing your thoughts. It's it's not easy. I mean, I've grown up in Europe, and for me, I grew up with wine around me
Right.
because it was part of our culture, as you just precisely described. It's a bit different in the US, but it has been, it has become a cultural product as well. So yeah, let's support the wine industry for sure. Any final comments or anything that you were hoping I would ask and I didn't, and you would like to share with our audience?
I think you've covered a lot of the good ideas.
Okay, thank you, Zeke, and thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your insights and your journey. And I wish you best of luck for this writing phase, because I know what it is, and I look forward to hearing, about your defense and reading your papers. And congratulations on your past accomplishments and the ones to come. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much as well. And thank you to AWSEF for giving me this opportunity to speak and spread my knowledge, or spread the research that I've been doing.
Our pleasure. Thank you.